President Donald Trump sat down with Fox News host Sean Hannity on Wednesday for his first major television network interview since he was reelected. The two discussed a wide range of topics, including executive orders, immigration, the California wildfires. Trump also touched on the pardon, specifically for former President Biden's decision not to pardon himself. Let's watch a bit of that.
This guy went around giving everybody pardons. And you know, the funny thing, maybe the sad thing, is he didn't give himself a pardon. And if you look at it, it all had to do with him.
Trump went on to say that Biden must have gotten bad advice from his advisors not to pardon himself.
On Monday, shortly after being sworn in, the president also pardoned people who took part in the January the 6th riots 4 years ago. You will recall that hundreds stormed the Capitol building as lawmakers tried to certify the 2020 election. Despite vowing at one point to only pardon non-violent offenders, Trump in fact pardoned roughly 1,500 people, including those who had in fact been convicted of violent offences. In a small number of other cases, Trump commuted sentences. During the interview, Trump defended the rioters. Take a listen.
These people have served horribly a long time. It would be very, very cumbersome to go and look. You know how many people we're talking about? 1,500 people. Almost all of them this should not have happened. And the other thing is this, some of those people with the police, true, but they were very minor incidents, okay? You know, they get built up by a couple of fake guys that are on CNN all the time.
Nobody watches.
They were very minor incidents.
Let's circle back to J6. Biden, he didn't pardon himself. Right. He pardoned many other members of his family and a lot of political figures and that kind of thing. I don't know that the idea of pardoning himself, did that occur to him? I don't know.
I don't know. And I also thought that in that interview, Trump made sort of very vague claims about Biden himself. He said something to the effect of the money went to him, which, I mean, I don't know if that's a reference to the whole 10% for the big guy kind of quote that was alluded to. There was obviously no substantiated clear evidence that would have seemed to require a pardon for Joe Biden himself. I assume Trump is doing it to try to sort of pump out a kind of smoke suggesting guilt where that is at least not borne out by the evidence thus far. I don't know why Biden would pardon himself.
Yeah, I don't either. Of course, I don't know why he would pardon all the members of his family. That did not seem like a good idea. And we've now thrown open the door, certainly, you know, if he's escalated the preemptive pardoning situation, Trump might very well be the first person to pardon himself before he leaves in 4 years, or just every Republican or everyone in Washington, D.C. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, later in the show, I think we're getting to an interview a Democratic strategist gave where he talked about the dangers of giving those pardons to Biden's family and the idea that those set a bad precedent and are generally a bad look. And as you know, I agree with that. I didn't think he should have pardoned Hunter Biden. I didn't think he should have given those last-minute pardons to other members of his family either.
Something we do not agree is on the January 6th situation. So some of them were commutations. It was commutations for the kinds of people who got extremely long sentences for seditious conspiracy, Enrique Tarrio and other leaders of the Proud Boys. I have said that is actually the part of this I agree with probably most heartily because, as I argued earlier on the show, I do think those sentences were just absurdly long. The government had sought 40 years in those cases, and the judge gave them 20. There was both a trial penalty, which is, and this is not unique to the Enrique Tarrio situation. This is just something in the criminal justice system that bothers me, that if you don't take a plea, so the mandatory sentences are so long and so aggressive, and I think you agree with this on some level, that people can't, there's pressure to take a plea deal, and in the vast majority of criminal cases, there is a agreement with the plea deal, and it never actually goes to the jury. If you fight for your innocence, if you actually argue your innocence, you pay a trial penalty, and you have mandatory sentencing, and they throw the book at you, and you get these just outrageous sentences. I think 20 years for what actually happened was insane, and so I'm fine to have these excessively long sentences rained at. Look, I think you should rot in prison for 20 years if you committed like murder, like mass murder, not for the theory was helping to organize this, right? He wasn't even there on that day, but I think you disagree.
I disagree, certainly in the case of Enrique Tarrio, who'd been ordered to leave the District of Columbia, partly because he was under scrutiny by law enforcement for messaging chats where he and his allies had been talking about, in one instance, talking about a revolution seizing crucial buildings, and certainly Enrique Tarrio on public social media, having been involved in the pre-January the 6th organisation, was certainly celebrating it while it was going on, and was a key figure. But my bigger point in today's discussion is the description by the President of the United States of what happened on January the 6th has been mostly very minor incidents. People can look at the footage. It's unfortunate we don't have the footage here right now, but 170 people pleaded guilty to assaulting or obstructing law enforcement. 140 law enforcement. Oh, we do have some of the video here now, where we can actually see some of the things that occurred. And various people have been convicted of extremely violent activities. No, hold on. So, I mean, for example, one of the police officers on duty was Daniel Fanoon, who testified how he was dragged from a line of officers and into the crowd. I heard someone scream, "I got one." They seized ammunition that was secured to my body. They began to beat me with their fists and what felt like hard metal objects. There were other figures like, let's say, Mr. David Dempsey, who was described as by prosecutors as one of the most violent rioters. He was, according to evidence, climbed over fellow rioters, quote, like human scaffolding, and used, quote, his hands, feet, flagpoles, crutches, pepper spray, broken pieces of furniture, and anything else he could get his hands on as weapons against officers. Look at the footage that is playing there. That is not a very minor incident.
Of the about 1,500 people, my understanding is that 2/3 were charged with totally nonviolent offenses. So it's a much smaller number of people who are charged with violent offenses. Do I think they should have had their convictions totally wiped away? No. Now, many of these people have already served some amount of time in prison, so the penalty has been paid, and of course they all lost their jobs and their livelihoods and all of that. So there has been
not
punishment.
been paid by those who we saw being released just in the past couple of days. I mean, the penalty has been lifted by the President of the United States for participating in a violent attempt to overthrow an election.
You can't give them back the time they had already spent in prison.
No, but the point is they would have spent more time in prison were it not for Trump's intervention.
Right. Well, yes. That's where we disagree, because I don't need people to spend 10 or 20 years in prison for most of the kind of actions I saw. Now, it should have been case by case, because maybe there are instances where I would look at that and go, a longer prison sentence was needed. But no one was murdered by the protesters, and so.
Does it not give you any pause at all for a President of the United States to describe widespread assaults on law enforcement as very minor incidents?
I would not characterize them as very minor instances, but I would also not characterize them as an organized plot to occupy or overthrow the government, just as the crazy, deranged leftist kids who occupy buildings in Colombia or whatever. I don't think they're terrorists. I don't think they even need to go to prison at all. Maybe they got to get academic suspension or something, but it's not like just being in the building is not.
It's, this is just a sort of diversionary tactic, I think, to dilute the significance of what happened on January the 6th. And we have been through it and we have argued about it quite vigorously before. It was an attempt to thwart the certification of the election, to keep the loser of that election in power. As I say, 170 people pleading guilty to assaulting or obstructing law enforcement officers. Those people should serve the time that was rightly given to them.
More Rising right after this.